What's a friendly gesture in one country but a big no-no in another? In Brazil we are very pro hugs even with strangers depending on the situation. Like tight hugs, we have no problems about touching as in the shoulder or arm while talking, or side hugging to take pictures with strangers. We also have the kissing thing. Not between men though. We share our life story and feelings with strangers pretty easily. Waiting in line together, micro-friendships are a thing. There are many cultures where this level of touching and sharing would be considered incredibly weird. Read an interesting paper once about how different cultures see time. The two biggest contrasts I think were Sweden and Brazil, and there's actually some psychology. In Sweden, as well as other Northern Euro countries, colonies, the day is seen as a series of time blocks with events occupying those time blocks. In Brazil, as well as other Latin American, Mediterranean countries, colonies, they see the day as a series of events, and you fill your time up with these events whenever you get to them. In the West, a lot of people when greeting kids, put their hand in the kid's head, ruffling up their hair or something like that. In Thailand the majority of the country is Buddhist and follows the belief to some extent. The head is held as a sacred and cleanest part of the body, even if it's a kid, so this practice is considered very offensive. Luckily the Thais are very understanding and forgiving people and would happily accept an apology for this oversight and would only hold a grudge if it came from someone who they know to be aware of this. Another thing that we in the West might do without thinking is step across someone and you needed to get past. For example, if people were sat on the floor around a fire, or a low table, maybe just chilling on the grass with friends in the park or at a festival. If you needed to get past someone you may step over their body to some degree, maybe stepping over their legs or something innocuous to us. Just as the head is held in high regard, the feet are the opposite, believed to be dirty, and it is very disrespectful to point your feet at someone, step over any part of their body, etc. A simple "excuse me, coat-toed cop," with a gesture in the direction you wish to pass will result in the person happily moving out of your way and appreciating your respect of their cultural beliefs. I had a Chinese neighbor who would stare at me, and I mean stare. There was one time when he was in his front yard and I was getting in my car. I decided to stare back. We just stared at each other for a good 20 seconds. I lost the staring contest because it was agonizingly awkward. I researched Chinese customs and found out that they apparently stare a lot, and I guess it's not really friendly, but it's just a normal thing in China. In the US, staring is considered extremely strange and rude. He didn't speak English, so I couldn't even tell him that he was making me and my wife uncomfortable with his constant death stare. Took a trip to Australia last summer, and I'm from the US. When people heard my accent they would ask, "Are you Canadian?" And after having replied no to several people, I asked why they never asked if I was from the States. Apparently Canadians are insulted if you ask them if they are American, so it's just custom to ask everyone if they are Canadian first. It seems like a few countries do that. I've seen replies that said Philippines and China, but from my experience it's normal in Jamaica too. I had a Jamaican coworker who used to say it to me all the time, and the first time I got super offended. Not directly because she called me fat, but just because I thought she was trying to disrespect me, and by the end of me working with her I was saying hell yeah I got fat. Think about it like this. You show up to your desk job, you do your job all day, everyone's happy with your work, and one coworker says nice Excel sheet, here's $2. Get yourself something nice. That would feel patronizing. No, not tipping in the US is rude because it's accepted that tips are a core part of the person's wages, and not tipping is effectively akin to saying this person doesn't deserve to be paid a full day's wage. It's not a kind gesture to tip, it's essential because the system is built around them needing to be tipped to get a full day's pay. In places where people are guaranteed a full day's pay regardless, and they show up knowing they do X duties for Y pay, a random person giving them a few extra bucks feels insulting because it's implying that 1, they need it, and 2, they're not doing their full job because a customer has felt the need to entice them to work harder. I can attest to this. I'm from the southeast US and it is normal to ask the cashier at the supermarket how they are doing and make small talk like they are a coworker at the water cooler. I smile in most of my interactions with people because, I don't know, it seems like the nice thing to do and I like to be treated that way. I moved to Beijing and lived there a year and there was a security guard I saw every single morning, so I'd wave and smile and he looked extremely embarrassed, so I stopped. Similarly, there was a young woman who worked at the corner store in my complex who I would see literally day after work, and one day I said, "How is your day going?" or "Have a nice weekend," and she looked over at her friend like it was the most insane thing that had happened to her ever. On the other hand, some various old people in my neighborhood would talk to me for hours, so I don't really know what the deal was. My sister-in-law recently came to stay with me while my husband was out of town. Apparently in my husband's culture it is a sign of gratitude for guests to help clean around the house and help with cooking. Meanwhile in my American culture having a guest over means busting my ass to clean the house to the point of being spotless and making sure there is a ton of snacks and food available before the guest gets there. First morning she got up like an hour before me and swept the whole house and even brushed the cat hair off the cat tree. She also would not let me help cook dinner lol. It made me uncomfortable at first and I tried to tell her that she didn't need to do all that, nicely, not in a rude way, but she was very insistent on wanting to help out, so I just let her. Apparently it was making her uncomfortable sitting around while she was here lol. Definitely a conflict of cultural norms there lol. I'm from Montreal. Typically, French Canadians put on a huge, coordinated spread and take pride in having more food than anyone can eat. You absolutely don't bring food when you go visit, but you do help out with the dishes, moving chairs, etc. English Canadians take pride in having a clean, efficient house. You always bring some food or drink to contribute, but you stay well away from the kitchen and don't offer to help with chores. There are exceptions, but that's basically it. My family is English Canadian on my dad's side and French Canadian on my mother's. The culture shock can be real. I'm most comfortable with French Canadian customs, but most of my friends are English Canadian. It's always really frustrating when they bring food I don't need or have a clean dish for and then leave me with all the dishes, and I just have to take a deep breath and remember they're just being polite in the way they know how. I try to remember to bring stuff when I go to their place, but I still struggle with not helping clean up. Thankfully, my best friend gets it. My parents were in Ireland on their honeymoon. They finished their food, because they didn't want to be rude. So, the hosts gave them more. They finished that, they wouldn't be rude, and so they got more. They finished that, and got more. At this point, they were most likely quite full, but this continued until they couldn't eat anymore. I doubt they ate any more mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving that year. Yeah, the West, specifically America, and the Asian nations must have had some wild times. In China, you're apparently supposed to be careful with the number 4 since it sounds like the word for death in Mandarin. In the West, predominantly in America, we must have what seems to be a wild view of death to the Chinese. Like, we have death metal, Halloween is a huge ass deal, and one of the greatest albums of all time, Ride the Lightning for Metallica, is all about fucking death. My parents lived in various parts of the world for work. In the Solomon Islands it's taboo for men and women to show physical contact or affection in public. Even a husband and wife may not hold hands in the street. However, men holding hands with men, women with women is 100% fine. There is zero implication of homosexuality or anything other than friendship. Also, when I visited I had to find some long sundresses to wear. Women have to have their legs covered, and not just that either. The space between their legs should also not be visible. Therefore no shorts, no jeans. There was a hotel by a beach that my parents said was fenced off, especially so that ladies could wear shorts, bikinis without causing offense. Everywhere else, big no number. Dude, that varies across the states, too. I'm from the Midwest, where you say hi to pretty much anyone you pass on the street, and it's normal to chat with whomever happens to be nearby if you're going to be waiting around a bit. On the bus and what we have of a subway, people chat all the time, especially if something happens that everyone sees, like a car crash outside the window or a jet fighter passing overhead. But I went to DC and it was dead quiet on every bus and train. I get motion sickness and dry heaved in front of the entire train car, and when I celebrated my qualified victory nobody looked up. Yet I remember a crowded subway trip in my city where we spontaneously broke into Stand By Me. Alcohol was involved, admittedly. In some places, when you're at dinner and the host offers more, you're supposed to decline, otherwise you're implying it wasn't enough. Similarly, some cultures find it terribly rude to season your food. Like what? You think you know better than the chef? Both are pretty silly, since individual portion sizes and tastes vary. We had an exchange student from Mongolia back in middle school. The rumor was that when she got off the airplane to see her exchange family the mom put her arm around her, or her hand on her shoulder, I don't remember, and she spent like 2 days locked in her room crying thinking her new family hated her. I don't know what the exchange meant to her but it was apparently pretty rough. A quick Google search told me these customs. Mongolians tend to touch one another, even those whom they do not know. Mongolians touch each other more than Anglo-Saxons. It is normal to see men or women holding hands or putting their arms around each other's shoulders. An older person will often grasp the head of a one younger during the greeting and smell their hair or face. So, that probably wasn't true. I think in Korea eating with slurping sounds is a sign that chef made a good food, and if you eat quietly then it is not tasty. And deep in China, I hope I didn't forget what country, if you do not finish food then that means that you liked it and it made you full. But if you finish it fully then that means that you didn't like it and you are not full. So, like still hungry. It's disrespectful toward chef if there is no food in your plate. I hope I wrote correct name of country. My memory is bad lately. Korean here. You are parrotly true. If you were slurping when dining with your so's parents for the first time or with your boss, or basically when it's a formal setting, you will definitely look weird and will get some looks. But if you were with your friend or you grandma or that sort of deal, they will think you are extremely hungry or really enjoying the meal. I think in Korea eating with slurping sounds is a sign that chef made a good food, and if you eat quietly then it is not tasty. This is a very awkward thing in America, where those habits are considered crude and unwelcome. But if someone has eaten this way all of their life, telling them you must eat quietly and with your mouth closed means they almost can't eat. I can understand that they've never learned how to eat like that. One more thing about China that I learned from my Chinese friends is that when someone does cheers and clinks their glass of wine or any other drink with your glass, if they are older than you in age or in position, senior at work, your glass should always be a little lower, to show respect. But then the other person would also want to bring the glass lower to show respect to you and it can lead to some funny, awkward glass clinking. Patting a child on the head or ruffling their hair is innocent enough in most Western countries, except those where any contact with a child including your own, is gonna attract Chris Hansen wannabes, but Turk in Southeast Asia is a big no-no, for religious reasons maybe. Small talk at a bus stop is common in Southern Europe, but in Nordic countries it's not really appreciated. Warning, long. I worked at a job with several Chinese and Taiwanese exchange students, among others, but these are the important ones to this story. At my job, we all live and work in close quarters, dorm rooms for some and nearby RVs for others. Every year, we have a playful Christmas and August gift exchange, what's called here in the States a white elephant style, where people can steal or exchange gifts in a sequence. The rules are complicated, and it's very silly and fun. Well, a few years ago, one of our exchange students from China brought a special bamboo hand fan for the gift exchange. Myself and one other American fought over it. Myself because I collect fans from all over the world. My American friend because he's always wanted one. I eventually won. But, to my horror, my American friend was devastated that I'd taken the fan. Several hours later, I quietly slipped the fan in a bag, with a note saying that our friendship was more important to me, onto the handle of his dorm room door. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done, but he did. Word got around. The Taiwanese students laughed at us for putting such importance on something they considered commonplace, but one of the Chinese students apparently took it very seriously. Now, for context, I was their manager. Everyone in this story's manager, but outside of work hours we were more like family. A few days later, one of my Chinese kids came into the kitchen with me and said, with his charmingly broken English, "I notice you really want that fan." And I asked, "Why? How do you know this thing?" I explained that my grandmother brought me a fan from France when I was small, and I've collected them ever since. I have 40-50 of them and I cherish them deeply. He said, "Well, that was my gift, but I bring two with me, and I prepare this one as gift for you, to thank you for being such a good boss." He handed me an elaborately wrapped gift box. Now, here's, finally, my fuck-up. In America, when presented with a gift, you open it immediately and crow about how much you love it, even if you don't. It is rude not to. In China, I now understand, you wait until you are alone or not with the gift giver to open a gift. This is because, if you do not like it, they do not lose face for giving you a bad gift. So, not knowing this, I opened and cooed over it, expressing awe at the delicate flowers it showed, begging him to read me the Chinese symbols, a poem, comma painted on it, flapping it around, just generally being totally in love. He said, quietly, laughing, "In my country it is rude, open a gift in front of giver. If bad gift, giver has shame. I am glad you like it, no shame. Due endless apologies from me. Whoops." In Germany, when you buy something at a shop, there is usually a small dish or tray on the counter. You place your cash there, so the cashier can see it and count it easily. In Korea, this would be very rude. There you should hand your money directly to the cashier. Using both hands is even more formal. I lived in both places when I was in the army. This little quirk always made me wonder how the different systems came about. Not just poverty. No matter how much food you can afford, I would think it's always upsetting to see food you put your heart and soul and several hours into crafting beautifully, end up in the garbage. Like, imagine if you knit me a cardigan, scarf, hat and mitten set, and I threw the scarf in the garbage. I expect that in the cultures where something must be left on the plate, people usually pick something low effort like rice or bread, or maybe it's common to have servants, so it's not the host's own efforts going to waste. While working on a project in Egypt, I arrived at my office one day and found my secretary bright red in the face, working very hard to stifle an outburst of unladylike laughter. Just prior to my arrival, one of the engineers had stopped by to invite me to his wedding reception. Although my secretary had never been to America, she knew enough about our culture to expect that a male guest at an American wedding reception will kiss the bride and shake hands with the groom. In Egypt, it's the other way around. Of course, she gave me proper warning, but she could not help but imagine what might happen if she didn't. Bicep polishing gesture that is done in Japan, but not here in the USA. I remembered a game for the Super NES that had Bowser clenching his fists, except in the Japanese version where he did the bicep polishing gesture. I wasn't sure about it until I was in middle school when some kids got into a fight. One of them was upset at the Asian kid, Jet, who did the gesture in front of other Asians at a small card game. The other Asians didn't seem to care about it and just went with the game, during the hour lunch. Yet, this non-Asian kid, Bobby, who was white, that Jet had given them the finger for no reason. I had to ask another random, Tom, what was going on. Tom explained that Jet gave the finger to Bobby but doesn't know why. The boys were called into the office. I don't remember what they got, as this was around 2000, but was finally told by a teacher about cultural matters and explained what Brasdon their gesture was. Jet had made the gesture but was doing that towards another kid in a card game. To the Asian kids, it was just a gesture used to start a round of a game. Similar to a handshake, Jet wasn't aware that it was considered offensive in many Latin American regions, borrowed over from the Southern Europeans, mostly the Iberian region of Spain.